What if I told you that your mental health might not be the problem? What if the reason you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, or like you're constantly falling behind isn't because you're broken, but because you're trying to function in a world that wasn't built for how your brain works? Because for a lot of neurodivergent people, mental health isn't just internal, it's environmental. And today we're going to talk about why. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Minds That Think Differently. I'm your host, Amanda. For accessibility, I'll give a brief visual description of myself. I am white with brown shoulder-length hair, and today I'm wearing a black shirt with purple flowers. If you haven't listened to any of the previous episodes yet, I highly recommend starting with those since this episode builds on those ideas. In the first episode, I introduced neurodiversity and key terminology, and in the last episode, I talked about myths and misconceptions surrounding neurodivergence, mental health, and disability. Today, we're going to be continuing that conversation by focusing on mental health, what it is, why it matters, and how it connects to neurodivergence. I want you to think about something for a second. Have you ever felt completely drained? Like even small things take too much energy, but you don't know why? Or have you ever felt like you're functioning fine on the outside, but internally everything feels overwhelming? There's a reason for that. The way I like to think about it is this. Everyone has a battery. Most people's drain slowly throughout the day, and they have some left over at the end, but not much. For a lot of neurodivergent people, that battery drains faster than it should, leaving us with barely any battery left and not much energy at all. Not because something is wrong with us, but because we're trying to run in environments that weren't designed for how our brains work. That battery works the same for mental health. For people who aren't struggling with mental health, their battery drains slowly. But people who are struggling with their mental health start with a lower battery in the first place. They might start at 70% instead of at 100%. So in this episode, we're going to break that down. If you have questions or suggestions, please feel free to email me at connect@thinkdifferentpod.com. With that, let's get started. Content warning. This episode contains educational discussions of medical gaslighting, trauma, suicide, and self-harm. Resources for immediate support are included in the show notes and in this episode. The information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I will start out today with my mailbox segment. Today's question is, how do I know if I'm actually struggling with my mental health or if I'm just being dramatic or lazy? First, I want to say this as clearly as possible. Struggling does not make you lazy, and having emotions does not make you dramatic. A lot of people internalize that idea because of stigma, whether it's from school, family, social media, or even how mental health is talked about in general. We're often taught that unless something is extreme or visible, it doesn't count. But mental health doesn't work like that. It's not all or nothing. It's not just fine or not fine. It exists on a spectrum, and it can change depending on your environment, your stress levels, and how your brain processes the world. Especially for neurodivergent people, things like masking, sensory overload, and constant stress can make everything feel harder, even if it doesn't look like it from the outside. So if you're feeling more exhausted than usual, if small tasks feel overwhelming, or if things that used to be easy suddenly feel difficult, that's not you being lazy. That's your brain and body trying to tell you something. Instead of asking, am I overreacting? Try asking, what might be causing me to feel this way? And that's actually a really good place to start, because before we talk about specific conditions or labels, we need to understand what mental health actually is. Let's begin with a definition of what mental health is. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Mental and physical health are interconnected. Mental health isn't just the absence of illness. It's also about the presence of well-being and the ability to thrive. Mental health is important for everyone, but neurodivergent people can often struggle more with their mental health, and mental health and neurodiversity often overlap. For neurodivergent people, our mental health is often impacted by how much we have to fight to live in a world that wasn't built for us. There is a term called allostatic load, which is the wear and tear on the body that accumulates as an individual is exposed to repeated or chronic stress. For many neurodivergent people, simply existing in a high-sensory neurotypical world keeps stress hormones high, which is why our batteries drain so much faster than others. Neurotypical people might end their day with 20 or 30% battery, while neurodivergent people and those struggling with mental health may end their day at 5% or lower. First, I want to talk about why neurodivergent people are more affected by mental health. Just like how neurodivergence is co-occurring, certain mental health conditions are more common in neurodivergent individuals. For example, autistic people and ADHDers tend to have higher rates of anxiety and depression compared to those who are not neurodivergent. A huge source of this stress is something called the double empathy problem. Historically, people thought neurodivergent people lacked empathy or social skills, but this theory suggests that communication is a two-way street. When two neurodivergent people talk, they usually understand each other fine. The problem only arises when a neurotypical and a neurodivergent person try to communicate across different operating systems. The mental health toll comes from the fact that we are usually the ones expected to do 100% of the work to bridge that gap. Over time, that constant pressure to adapt can take a serious toll on our mental health. So when we talk about mental health in neurodivergent people, we are not just talking about what's happening inside the person. We also have to look at the environment around them. Neurodivergent people often experience more stress and social stigma from sensory overload, masking, executive function, and difficulties accessing accommodations, which leads to higher amounts of anxiety and depression in neurodivergent people. Specifically, some conditions also have research linking a high connection between these and people with certain neurotypes. I've talked about masking in previous episodes, but let's recap. Masking is when you consciously or unconsciously change your behavior, personality, or reactions to fit in with others or meet expectations. I want you to take a second and think about that. Have you ever changed the way you act, speak, or react just to fit in, even in tiny ways, without even realizing it? Neurodivergent people also tend to experience trauma at a higher level than neurotypical people, which can negatively affect their mental health. On top of that, medical gaslighting, which is when healthcare providers dismiss, minimize, or misattribute symptoms, is unfortunately very common for neurodivergent people, which can make people feel invalidated, increase anxiety, and make them hesitant to seek help in the future. It's also important to remember that neurodivergence and mental health are not the same thing. You can be an autistic person with excellent mental health, and you can be a neurotypical person with a mental health condition. They can coexist, but they are two separate things. As I mentioned earlier, if we keep that battery analogy in mind, we can see that mental health also isn't just healthy or unhealthy. It exists on a sliding scale that can change from day to day. Mental health can fluctuate based on sensory load and burnout. In episode 1, we talked about using support needs instead of functioning labels. This is where that really matters. When your mental health battery is low, your support needs might temporarily increase. That doesn't mean you've regressed. It just means your system needs more resources right now. Before I transition into mental health diagnoses, I want to cover that mental health isn't good or bad. It's a spectrum, and we all fall somewhere on that spectrum on any given day. You don't need a diagnosis for your struggles to be valid, and your experiences matter regardless of labels. In this community, we recognize that professional diagnosis is a privilege that isn't accessible to everyone due to cost, race, gender, or medical gaslighting. It's estimated that for every 3 to 4 boys diagnosed with autism, only 1 girl is diagnosed. In the U.S., Black and Hispanic children are also less likely to receive an ADHD diagnosis compared to white children due to systemic bias and lack of specialists. Remember that in the first episode, I talked about person-first and identity-first language. In the neurodivergent world, we prefer identity-first language, such as autistic person, but in the mental health world, many prefer person-first language, such as person with depression. Both approaches are valid. It often comes down to personal preference. In this next segment, I will be talking about common mental health diagnoses, but in a way that goes beyond definitions. Because chances are, what you've learned about these conditions didn't come from psychology textbooks. It came from movies, social media, or things people say casually. And a lot of that information is incomplete or just wrong. So as I go through these, I want you to notice not just what each condition is, but how it's misunderstood. First, let's talk about bipolar. Bipolar involves extreme mood swings, including emotional highs known as mania or hypomania, and lows, which are depressive episodes. These mood shifts can affect sleep, energy, activity level, judgment, behavior, and the ability to think clearly. Some people have long periods of emotional stability between mood swings, others have frequent mood swings. A manic episode might look like needing very little sleep, having racing thoughts, or feeling extremely confident or impulsive, while a depressive episode might look like extreme fatigue, loss of interest in everything, and difficulty functioning day to day. Someone in a manic phase might suddenly start multiple projects, spend a lot of money, or feel like they can do anything, but when the depressive phase hits, even getting out of bed or replying to a text can feel impossible. A few common myths about bipolar disorder are that people with bipolar disorder are always either manic or depressed, or that it's caused by a personal failing. That's not true. People with bipolar disorder can and do live full, stable lives, and many symptoms aren't always visible from the outside. Next, let's talk about depression, and this is one that people think they understand, but often don't. There are many types of depression, and later episodes will go more in depth when I have a full episode on depression, but to briefly name a few, major depressive disorder involves persistent sadness and loss of interest in life that lasts at least 2 weeks. Persistent depressive disorder is usually less severe than major depression, but it lasts much longer, for more than 2 years. Seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression that happens during certain times of the year, such as winter. PMDD, or premenstrual dysphoric disorder, can also cause depression. To tie depression in with neurodivergence, up to 30% of people with ADHD will have a depressive episode in their lifetime, and depression, anxiety, and ADHD are commonly co-occurring. A common misconception is that depression is just feeling sad, but it's much more than that. Not everyone with depression is suicidal, and it doesn't only happen after a traumatic event. It can affect anyone at any time, and talking about depression doesn't make it worse. In fact, talking about it is often a key step in managing it. Depression can feel like emptiness instead of sadness, numbness instead of emotion, or exhaustion that doesn't go away with rest. Someone with depression might cancel plans, stop responding to messages, or lose interest in the things they love. Not because they don't care, but because their brain literally doesn't give them that energy or motivation. I want to briefly talk about what the difference is between burnout and depression. Depression is a loss of interest in everything, including special interests, while burnout is often an extreme exhaustion that's caused by masking and sensory overload, where you want to do your hobbies but don't have the energy to move. If you've ever felt completely drained after just trying to be normal, this might be why. Masking leads to burnout because masking isn't just tiring. It's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain. It's what happens when you spend so long pretending to be okay that you don't even know what not pretending feels like anymore. Next is schizophrenia, one of the most misunderstood mental health conditions. It's neurological. It can include hallucinations such as seeing or hearing things that others don't, delusions, which are strongly held beliefs that aren't based in reality, and unorganized thinking. Schizophrenia can sometimes cause a person to lose touch with reality and can interfere with daily life. Someone with schizophrenia might hear voices others can't hear or struggle to organize their thoughts. There are a lot of harmful myths about schizophrenia. People with schizophrenia are not inherently dangerous, and they don't deserve to be isolated or institutionalized simply because of their condition. Many people with schizophrenia live meaningful, fulfilling lives. It's also more common than people think, affecting about 1 in 100 people. Another common misconception is that schizophrenia is split or multiple personalities. This is actually dissociative identity disorder. Schizophrenia is a condition related to how the brain processes sensory information and thoughts. Next, borderline personality disorder, or BPD, affects how people feel about themselves and others. It often involves intense emotions, unstable relationships, impulsive behaviors, and a strong fear of abandonment. These experiences can lead to mood swings, anger, and sometimes pushing people away. BPD is often co-occurring with ADHD and autism, and it can lead to misdiagnoses because BPD traits can often resemble those of ADHD and autism. For example, impulsivity and difficulty regulating emotions in ADHD can look like BPD. Because of this, many neurodivergent people, especially women and gender-diverse individuals, are misdiagnosed with BPD and then find out they are actually autistic or have ADHD. Understanding the why behind the behavior is the key to getting the right support. Someone with BPD might feel extremely close to someone one moment and then deeply hurt or rejected the next, even if nothing objectively changed. People with BPD are often labeled as manipulative or attention-seeking, but that's not accurate. They are often experiencing very intense emotions and may struggle with regulating them. People with BPD can form deep, meaningful relationships and live full lives. Next, narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. People with NPD have an unrealistic sense of their own importance and a strong need for admiration and sensitivity to criticism. While they may appear confident on the outside, many struggle with underlying insecurity and self-esteem issues. Someone with NPD might react strongly to criticism not because they think they're perfect, but because their self-esteem is actually very fragile underneath. Some common misconceptions about NPD are that narcissistic people are not always charming or aggressive. Most narcissistic people have low self-esteem. They are often aware of their own actions, but they tend to blame others due to embarrassment. Narcissism is not an act, and they're not faking it. While narcissistic traits are common in society, NPD itself is rare, affecting about 0.5 to 1% of the population. Finally, paranoid personality disorder, or PPD, which involves a long-term pattern of distrust and suspicion of others without adequate reason. People with paranoid personality disorder often believe others are trying to harm, deceive, or threaten them, even if there's no proof. Unlike other conditions, people with PPD do not experience hallucinations or delusions. It's more about persistent suspicion and difficulty trusting others, including friends and family. People with PPD are not inherently violent, and it's not simply about being socially awkward. Across all these conditions, there's one pattern. They are often reduced to stereotypes, but in reality, they're complex. They're often neurological or psychological, and they do not determine a person's worth or potential. None of these are caused by bad parenting, personal weakness, or not trying hard enough. And most importantly, people with these conditions are not broken. They're just human beings navigating experiences that deserve understanding, not judgment. Now that we've defined these conditions, let's talk about how to recognize them in ourselves or recognize if you are struggling with your mental health. Because especially for neurodivergent people, it can be hard to tell when you are struggling, especially if you have difficulties in interoception, meaning it can be harder to notice or interpret what's going on in your body. Interoception is your brain's ability to read the signals coming from your body, things like your heartbeat, hunger, thirst, or the feeling of a full bladder. For many neurodivergent people, these signals are either turned up or down. If your interoception is dampened, you may not realize your heart is racing until you're already in a panic attack, or you might not feel sad in your head, but your body is exhausted, and you don't realize it's because of a sudden mental health dip. This is why we often have lower batteries without realizing. Our battery was going down and we didn't even realize it. One of the biggest indicators of struggling with your mental health is sleep. If you have problems falling asleep, staying asleep, or even oversleeping, it can be a sign that something is off, like stress, anxiety, or burnout. You might also notice that you're more irritable or emotional than usual. Another common sign is a loss of joy or persistent sadness, especially if you find the things you used to enjoy just don't feel the same anymore. Low energy is another big one. Feeling constantly tired, sluggish, or drained throughout the day can be a sign that your mental health is struggling. It's important to recognize that mental health can look different in neurodivergent people. For example, anxiety could present as increased stimming or having more rigidity and stubbornness in routines. Depression could show up as a loss of special interests or masking fatigue. Depression could also just show up as not having the energy or the ability to mask or engage socially at all. Masking itself can change the way mental health presents in neurodivergent people. And due to masking, you might appear put together on the outside even if you're struggling internally, which can make it hard for both healthcare professionals and you as the individual to recognize what's going on. You might not have even realized you were doing this. And this doesn't mean you missed something. It means no one ever explained it. I want you to think about how much of what you show the world actually feels like you. Mental health challenges could also present as increased sensory sensitivities or difficulties with executive function. And finally, mental health challenges could develop during life changes or transitions, especially when they come with a lot of stress. Therapy is often needed for any of these mental health issues. For me personally, therapy has been a huge game changer. Having someone to talk to, someone who understands and supports you, can make a really big difference. At the same time, I want to acknowledge that therapy can be expensive, and I know that it's not accessible to everyone. And as I mentioned earlier, medical gaslighting can make it harder for neurodivergent people to seek out mental health care in the first place. If you are able to access therapy, it's really important to look for neurodivergent affirming care or neurodivergent affirming therapy. This type of therapy operates on the understanding that neurodivergence is a natural form of human diversity instead of a disorder to be fixed or normalized. The focus is on how your neurological profile interacts with mental health challenges and developing strategies that work with your brain. It also takes into account the ways mental health can present differently in neurodivergent people. It can also help to look for providers who specialize in neurodivergence, autism, or ADHD. These therapists are more likely to have experience working with neurodivergent clients and may better understand your experiences. Medications can be a helpful tool for some people, however, neurodivergent individuals have additional considerations. For example, certain medications can increase sensory sensitivity or overload. Because of that, it's important to work with a provider who understands neurodiversity and can help you find the right approach. And most importantly, seeking help is not a weakness. It's actually a sign of strength and self-awareness, not failure. How do you know when you need immediate help? If you experience thoughts of self-harm or suicide, it's really important to seek help right away. For neurodivergent people specifically, these feelings can be connected to extreme burnout, being exhausted from masking, or sensory input. But no matter the cause, you deserve support. You should also seek help if you have severe depression impacting your ability to care for yourself, or persistent anxiety interfering with daily functioning, or any psychotic symptoms. Suicidality doesn't always look like an immediate plan. For many in the neurodivergent community, it can be passive, a persistent feeling of feeling done or wanting to turn the world off. This is often tied to constantly being at that low battery life I mentioned earlier, and exhaustion and masking contribute to this. Even if these feelings aren't an immediate plan, they're a sign that your system is in critical need of support. You don't have to wait until you reach 0% to reach for a charger. During a crisis, unmasking can be important because it can help healthcare providers have more accurate information about the stress levels and needs. If you feel safe doing so, try to communicate things like stimming, eye contact preferences, or communication style. This can help them support you more effectively. If you are struggling with your mental health and cannot access therapy, or if you need immediate support, there are resources available. In the U.S., you can call or text 988 for the Suicide Crisis Hotline. I want to highlight the text option. I know for many of us, phone calls can feel overwhelming or cause a lot of sensory anxiety, especially when already in a crisis. So a lot of the options I will give have text options available. You can also text 741-741 for the crisis text line and connect with a trained counselor. The NAMI Helpline is another option for support and resources. For younger listeners under 26, the Trevor Project, text START to 678-678, or the teen line, call 800-852-8336, or text TEEN to 839-863. In the UK, you can text SHOUT to 85258. In Canada, you can text CONNECT to 686-868. In Ireland, you can text HOME to 50808. All of these numbers will be included in the show notes as well. If you're outside the US, there are similar services in many countries, so it's a good idea to look up crisis numbers ahead of time in case you ever need them. No matter where you are, the most important thing to do is reach out to someone who can help you. You don't have to go through this alone. If there's a lot of stigma around mental health in your environment, it can make these conversations feel harder, but there are ways to start breaking that stigma. If you feel comfortable, don't shy away from the topic, and if comfortable, sharing your own experiences can help open the door for more conversations. You can also help by educating yourself and others, and if you hear harmful jokes or stereotypes about mental health, challenge them and explain why they are harmful. It's also important to shift the focus from fixing mental health to supporting it. Mental health isn't something to hide or be ashamed of. It's something that deserves understanding and care. And finally, listen to others' stories and experiences. And when someone shares their experiences, try to respond with empathy and compassion. Sometimes simply being heard can make a difference. Before we move on, let's take a sensory break to just check in with yourself for a second. I know that was a lot of information. This time, I want you to focus on your breathing. Close your eyes and breathe in for a count of 4. Then exhale for a count of 6. Feel free to repeat that as many times as you need to help feel relaxed. Now I want to talk about how to support someone who is struggling with their mental health. Listening to them is the most important thing you can do. Really listen. Show them you care and that their feelings are valid. You could also offer practical help with tasks like grocery shopping, which could make a huge difference, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed. Encouraging professional help can also be really important. You can suggest therapy or other support and even help them take that step, like helping find a provider or offering to drive them to an appointment. Make sure you know that you are there for them and that you genuinely care about them and their health. It can help to educate yourself if they have a diagnosis like depression. Understanding what they are going through can make you a better source of support. Check in with them regularly, even if it's just a simple text or phone call. It shows them that you care and can remind them that they're not alone. Be patient and try not to pressure them to get better. Healing takes time, and support without pressure is much more helpful. Be mindful of your language and let them know it's okay to feel what they are feeling. When supporting a neurodivergent friend, remember the double empathy problem. Don't assume they are being difficult if they don't respond the way you expect. Instead of forcing them to meet you in the middle, try to meet them where they are. True support means acknowledging that their operating system is just as valid as yours. You can include them to things like inviting them to hang out, but be understanding if they say no. The goal is to offer connection without pressure. If you feel comfortable, you could share your own vulnerabilities, and it could help them feel less alone. But if you do this, be careful not to shift the focus away from them. There are also some things to avoid doing if you want to help a person with their mental health. Don't minimize what they're going through. That could make the person feel like you're dismissing their feelings. Don't feel like you have to fix what they are going through, and don't blame or shame them for their feelings. And also, it's important to know your limits. Supporting someone else can be emotionally demanding, so don't forget to care for yourself. You won't be able to help them if your own mental health takes a turn for the worse. I want to end this episode on a positive note, so I will be ending with how you can care for yourself and your own mental health. For neurodivergent people specifically, sensory support can make a huge difference. That could look like using sensory-friendly spaces when available, or tools like fidget items, noise-canceling headphones, or anything that helps you regulate emotions and reduce sensory overload. Having a sensory kit is something I would highly recommend. It's something that I have, and it's completely personalizable, so everyone's sensory kit will look different. Some examples of things you can have in it are noise-canceling headphones or earplugs, fidget toys, a water bottle or snack, a comfort item such as a stuffed animal, but whatever you put in it is completely up to you. You could keep a small bag in your backpack, a drawer at work, or a box at home, wherever you might need quick access to sensory supports. My kit, for example, is either in my pencil case when I'm at school or my purse when I'm out. I bring my noise-canceling earplugs, fidgets of different types, quiet, loud, sensory, pain, etc., and I also include sunglasses in my purse. It's also really important to celebrate the small things in life. Everyone's 100% looks different, and it's not helpful to compare yourself to others. If you ate 3 meals, drank water, and maybe went on a short walk today, that matters. Those are really important things for your mental health. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to live up to what you see on social media. What you're doing is enough. You are enough. And speaking of social media, taking some time off social media can be really beneficial. Spend some time with friends, pets, or yourself. Read a book, rest, or do something that feels calming. Try to develop systems that work for you to manage stress, anxiety, and sensory issues. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Everyone's brain is different, and what works for one person might not work for another. It could also be helpful to create a mental health crisis plan that can include your warning signs, coping strategies, and steps to take if things get worse. Having a plan can make it easier to recognize when you need support and what to do next. Connecting with others, people you love and who support you, can really improve your mental health, such as friends, family, or supportive communities. Finding a neurodivergent community, whether online or in person, can be very powerful. Being around people who understand your experiences can help you feel less alone. Contributing to your community in whatever way feels right to you could also be meaningful and grounding. And remember, especially if you struggle with mental health or chronic health conditions, that everyone's 100% is different, and your 100% will change day to day, and you don't need to give your 100% every day. Taking rest days and breaks is okay. Try to take some time every day to do things you love, your hobbies, interests, or anything that brings you a sense of joy. Balance your stress as best you can, and try not to take on more than you're able to handle. Staying active can help, but that doesn't have to mean a gym or a long walk. If all you can do today is stretch in bed or walk to the mailbox, that counts. Movement is about regulation, not performance. Pay attention to the present moment and to your body. This also ties into mindfulness, just noticing how you feel without judgment. Make and set boundaries. It's okay to say no if saying yes will overwhelm you. It's also okay to take breaks and self-care days. And finally, focus on positivity, and focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Caring for your mental health helps recharge your battery. Sensory supports, small wins, rest days, and boundaries are all ways to plug in and give your system the energy it needs to thrive. This episode is just an introduction, and it's definitely not the end of the conversation. This is a continuing conversation about mental health, which will continue in later episodes. Now on to the recap. Mental health encompasses emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Neurodivergent individuals can struggle more with mental health due to social stigma, sensory overload, and difficulties accessing accommodations. I broke down common mental health diagnoses and misconceptions for each one. I talked about how mental health can appear differently in neurodivergent people, such as anxiety looking like stimming, or depression like losing interest in special interests. I talked about the importance of neurodivergent affirming care and how seeking help is not a weakness but a strength. I talked about how you can support yourself and others by listening, offering help with tasks, checking in regularly, and using sensory-friendly spaces and setting boundaries. Understanding mental health isn't just about diagnoses. It's about understanding ourselves and each other better. Now, before I finish up the episode, I want to leave you with an affirmation and a question. Our affirmation for today is, you are enough. And the question for today is, what does mental health mean to you? In the next episode, I will be covering accommodations, including IEPs, 504s, and workplace accommodations. Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember that this was just a basic introduction to mental health, and there will be much more to come. Stay tuned for my next episode, and I hope you enjoy Minds That Think Differently.